Well, hello everybody. How you doing?
Hello.
Hello there. There's no music. Well, this is our first official episode of Indian only from now on. Indian films
Very
only,
exciting.
So, and we picked a butte. The
they picked the butte.
That's
Ralph.
right. No,
you guys recommended this one.
they did, but it was part of a wheel that was spun, and this is the one that was spun.
Yep.
So us 6 idiots are going to review 3 idiots. So Drew, I'm going to throw it to you. Why don't you describe the film, 3 Idiots?
Wait, I thought we watched Drishyam.
You may have, but we watched 3 Idiots. So,
I would start by saying probably Zubi Dubi Pum Para.
All is well.
Zubi Dubi Param Pum.
Parapum.
3 Idiots, I think, is sort of the closest to something conventional that we're familiar with the kind of movies that we see in this country. It's a comedy set at an engineering university, at an elite engineering university, and it doesn't have, this is not a criticism, it doesn't have, very many surprises, but it's, 3 men that are idiots, according to each other. They're not really idiots, that, spoiler, but they meet at this university, and they try to figure out who they are as people, and one of them is much more of a free spirit and inspires the other 2, and they tussle with the director of the school, and they fall in love with girls, and they deal with the challenges of academia and try to figure out what they want to do with their life. And that's fine. I think it was entertaining and sweet. The most Indian thing about it, to me personally, is that it was 2 hours and 40 some minutes long, and I don't know that it needed to be that long, but it immediately reminded me of a lot of other movies that are in that genre, and I think it's a nice entry in that genre, although it doesn't rise to the level of my favorite nerd college movie, which is Real Genius.
it's funny you say Real Genius.
Yeah, it's such a
that's the
vibe for that
total
movie.
vibe I was getting through the whole film.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right down to the evil professor and the one smarmy kid that causes all the trouble that end up getting his comeuppance.
Yep. The Kent.
The smart, free,
Kent.
like you said, the free spirit. Val Kilmer was definitely a free spirit.
Also, it's based on a novel. It's called, hold on, I know what it's called. I just forgot it. It's called 5 Point Someone, which is about engineering students and their life, their adventures, and the movie draws on a lot of it. I obviously haven't read the book. This is actually the second adaptation or the second film that's been made from it. This was a humongous hit film. I think a lot of people were familiar with the book, but even more people saw the movie. And I think at one point it was definitely one of the highest grossing Indian films ever, which later, of course, was, defeated by other movies like RRR that we've already watched. But it's sweet and funny. And as I said, it doesn't have a lot of surprises, but there's nothing really wrong with that. I enjoyed it. I thought it was sweet.
Yeah, and it came out 2009, so this came out a while ago.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that explains one thing. To me, what was shocking is I looked up the guy who's a gigantic star in India, the guy who plays the main idiot,
Aamir Khan.
Rancho.
Yeah, he's aged a little.
Yeah, I was about to say he's. I thought this was a recent film, and he's just a little bit younger than me.
Yeah, he was
I'm like,
44.
oh
when he
my
made this
God,
movie.
He was 44 when he made this
Yeah.
one. Aamir Khan,
Yeah.
who also, interestingly enough, is doing has done a shot-for-shot remake of Forrest Gump,
Really?
which I believe might be available on our Netflix here.
Wow.
So
Really?
An Indian Forrest Gump. That is fascinating.
it's shot for shot. The only changes are they're using Indian. Like when he meets the president. Our guy Forrest Gump met Nixon and all that.
Right.
So they wrap it in their culture, but it's basically shot for shot. So I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing, but he's in it, and he looks.
Well, I mean, the original is a terrible movie.
I
so
agree.
I imagine it would be
100%
terrible
agree.
from any other country.
Right. But yeah, he was 44 when he did this, and didn't all of those guys like when John? Which way did they shoot this? You mentioned that they shot.
Yeah,
it
the
out of order.
flashback they shot at the end. So all the flashback scenes were shot after the present stuff.
Because the kid who played the smarmy kid
Yeah.
really looked super old and super young in the scene
Yeah.
that he did.
They all looked a lot younger in the flashbacks. It was really interesting
Right.
the way they did that.
Yeah, and then I looked at the date he was born without looking at the year the movie came out. I'm like, oh my God, how could he do that? Particularly the younger stuff.
Yeah. Well, you were obsessed with his age, huh? Because he does come off looking fairly young in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's
He's
Drew,
been a star
interesting,
for a
Drew, that
long
you would
time.
say the thing that made it Indian to you was the length of it, not the music stuff that comes up in the middle of nowhere, like out of nowhere they're doing musical.
Well, those are the other two things that I think make it very Indian. Not that it needs to define itself that way, but I mean, it does have several songs that I would expect and that are entertaining. And the "All Is Well" song, the way that when we first hear it, the way it ends with the reveal of the student who's hung himself was very well done, and a real like sort of surprise kick. You knew what was going to happen, but you didn't know how they were going to do it till they fixed the drone.
Yeah,
And then the other thing is it's very, as I've said in a lot of these other movies, it's very earnest and it's very sweet. And there's a lot of men crying because they care about each other and they care about each other's lives, and the things that are at stake are important. And that's more, they're more open about their emotions and expressing them than a similar movie would be. Nobody's crying in Real Genius, and that's fine too. But it made the movie like this movie is an entertaining college comedy, but it's also quite sweet, and that made me feel a little warmer about it.
well,
I'm not going to lie. This movie made me cry. And it may be that I was just in that mode after John was talking about our weekend, but I was primed for this thing. And there's a couple of scenes that, I mean, the guys crying on each other's shoulders was enough. But when the baby scene and the scene with I just love that he fell in love with Pi. I think that was her name in this. The whole thing just got me. I thought this was just a lovely, lovely film and very funny. And I highly recommend this one. I just think it was just really, really nice. And
Well-
it did remind me of Real Genius, but that didn't take away from this particular film. I thought these
No, not at
characters
all.
No.
were very
Real
interesting.
Genius is a little more cynical.
Slightly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But it has more
Here's my
popcorn,
thoughts.
so it balances out.
Right.
That's right.
Now, my thoughts on this film were, I'm with Drew on the fact that it was pretty predictable. You kind of knew how all the major characters were going to turn out, and it's true. And I was thinking as this film was going through, and we had to watch it over 3 nights, not because of the film, but because of other things in our lives. But it's sort of like I predicted practically everything, and I'm sitting there looking at the length of the film, and I'm like, if this was an American film, this would have been 92 minutes long.
Of course.
But if it was an American film with 3 songs in it with dance routines, it would have been another 15 minutes. So, it would have been 110 minutes long. And I love the musical routines. This is the first time that people really got out. I mean, R&R was a revelation with that dance sequence in the middle. And this is the first time people really danced. And I like the All Is Well, and I like the other song on the scooter. But, talking about the kid killing himself, and that's another big thing with Indian films is unbelievable tonal changes.
Yeah.
Well, right.
And the one thing I wasn't sure of, I mean, I didn't realize that Rancho was essentially an imposter the whole time. But I knew once that one guy said he had a meeting with this rich guy that was going to make his future.
That was going to be him.
Sure.
There was nobody else that could be in the entire thing. But when the baby was born and the baby wasn't breathing, I really thought that baby could die because it's an Indian film, and they would certainly kill a baby to make a point. You know what I mean?
Well, they would definitely slap a kid. I don't know if they'd kill a baby, but they definitely would slap a kid.
And then they can make those kind of, like the woman getting hit in the head with that right at the beginning of R&R with that, that log.
Yeah.
I mean, they are willing to make monstrous tonal changes, and I say monstrous. I don't mean bad, just like
No, they're extreme. Absolutely.
U-turns, complete U-turns. Yeah.
And
Look, when the baby is born, it looked like the same doll that they used, that Bradley Cooper held in American Sniper. That was really unconvincing and terrible, and that kind of took me a little bit out of the scene. Like this baby mannequin isn't breathing, but then all of a sudden, the little puppet kicked its leg, and I was like, "Oh,
Yeah,
all
but
right."
not
And then,
him
of course,
going
then it
under
turns
the-
into a real baby.
well, it was more realistic than that rabbit at the beginning of Ahundan.
Wow, you guys. I mean, he's under her legs, under the blanket with a vacuum, and we're talking about
Well, look, there are more stringent laws against animal cruelty in films than baby cruelty. So that, I guess, is a different.
I actually used
Got that right, Drew.
today in a meeting talking about some of the stuff going on at work. I actually used All Is Well because I had an Indian kid across from me who I just said I had seen this film, and he raved about it, of course, and he was asking me questions, and I actually pulled the All Is Well in the middle of this meeting, so that made me feel good.
We do
John,
that in our real life with our situation,
right,
our
right.
family members. I mean, we were saying all is well,
All is
and
well.
all was going to hell, but it was all was well as it's going to hell, you know.
Yeah.
And you say that, and it really has meaning. But this movie, the parts I did enjoy some of it, but I just don't like the way they treat suicides. I'm sorry, it was like in your face, you know, and then always, and I couldn't understand why suicide all the time.
Well, I think that's actually one of the more realistic parts of the story, because the pressure that these students put on themselves because of the pressure they're put on their families, the idea that, I mean, these two guys that are the other two heroes besides Rancho, you know, they're at the bottom of the class, and that means real danger for their lives, their future careers, their earning potentials, all these things. And it means real danger for their families. I thought that was actually really well handled, the way that, especially, I'm totally blanking on his name, the one who wanted to become a wildlife photographer. And the way his father was like, it's not your choice.
Right.
Like, I've made this decision for you. And so then you have to decide, you know, can you succeed in this at all? Never mind, is it something that you don't want to do? And the pressure is unbelievable. And I felt that was very real.
And that's one thing I had heard, that this was quite realistic about the pressure involved in going to a school like this, from the family, from themselves, from the competition with everybody else. Frankly, the one that got me was one of our guys who jumped out the window. Now, you know, you know he lived because we've seen him at the beginning. So
that's what Debbie's like. Oh no, he killed him. Like,
but that scene,
we see him later.
That scene was so well staged with the the whole shaving, the joke about the shaving while he's sleeping, and then that lamp going through the window was just shocking. And I just thought it was just a well done scene.
And I thought that the lamp was going to save him, but it didn't. I mean,
but when you see him down on the ground and you realize, oh, he really did it, but you know he's going to be okay because we see him at the beginning.
Well, look, you have to remember, I tried to take my own life 12 years ago this week, actually.
Oh.
And if you decide that that's an option, that's how you know how, you know, sick that you are as far as your mental health, because it just seems like another choice. So of all the things that he could have done to respond to the fact that he was going to get thrown out of school, to respond to the fact that he was going to maybe his life was going to be drastically different, it just seemed like on that list, it's another option. I mean, that's why suicide is the one symptom of mental illness that is there's no cure for, there's no coming back from it. And so it felt very authentic that he was under so much pressure, put in himself by taking on the whole life that he's lived and what the expectations are and all those kinds of things. And he didn't plan it, obviously, but I wasn't surprised that he did it.
Well,
it's not particularly realistic that he jumped
and it also shows
his head and lived. But
as Sean said earlier, the tonal shifts in these films, it's just on a dime, like on a dime. You're going from a scene that you've seen all day of him getting shaved by his butler or whatever that guy was, to someone jumping out one of our guys jumping out the window and maybe killing himself. And it's like that. You don't have time to think about it. So, I mean, I
do want to say one more thing about suicide. I also attempted to take my own life, but it was many more years ago. 40? No. Oh, yeah. But it was a while ago. But the thing is, there's been a number of studies, particularly one on the Golden Gate Bridge, amongst those people who do not take their lives, who are not successful. It's rare for them to do it again and go through with it. You know, if you try to kill yourself and you don't succeed, you have like a 90% chance of not killing yourself.
Yeah, there was that documentary about the Golden Gate Bridge, and they interviewed people who had jumped and lived, and they pretty much all said the same thing. As soon as I stepped off the bridge, I thought, I'm making a huge mistake.
By the way, that is a fascinating documentary.
Yeah, I didn't see. I think it's just called The Bridge.
It's called The Bridge, and
it's excellent.
It's frightening, and it's depressing, and it's fabulous. But it is. You're right. One kid was saying, as soon as I went over the rail, I knew I didn't want to go, and it's too late.
Look, I mean, success in these schools means a totally different kind of life than not going at all or
Right.
failing out.
That's what I
or
mean.
any of those things. I mean, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, and there were people who spent 4 years going to Wharton, doing all these things because they were ready, just like in the movie. In that case, it was like Goldman Sachs and Anderson or whatever Accenture was. Like, they come and they are recruiting, and you can get a job, and it's 6 figures, and you're going to work 100 hours a week, but this is what you want, and you can get it right out of school. So if you went to Wharton and you blew it, you wouldn't have those opportunities. And if that's what's expected from you, and you're young, that's the thing you have to remember. These people are still basically,
Well,
in a lot
and
of
he's
ways,
got a
kids.
dad at home that's in a coma, whatever he was. All right, John and Chris, any fun things about the film you want to talk
Listen,
about?
I'm going to take a little different approach than all of you. This was, first of all, I want to thank the audience for recommending this. This was by far my favorite Indian movie that I've seen so far. I loved this movie. I was expecting one thing with the name The Three Idiots. I was thinking Dumb and Dumber.
Right.
And that opening scene where he fakes the heart attack, and then he's got that little, he comes out of it, and that funky music played. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a fun college thing. It's going to be funny. And then for me, I mean, everyone's saying it was predictable, and I guess some of it was predictable, but this movie had me engaged the entire time. I cared about the people in it. The lead, Aamir Khan, who I never heard of before, who is a gigantic Bollywood star, was amazing in this movie, and dare I say Chaplin-esque, because I'm telling you what the guy did with his facial expressions and his body language throughout the entire movie, you couldn't take your eyes off this guy. Now, the one thing I've seen a common theme in all these Indian movies is they have very charismatic leading people in it, and this guy was about as charismatic as you could be. You got, the change in tones, like they had this beautiful dance number with all the guys at the college, and it was all upbeat and happy, and they get the drone going and they're all happy. They're excited about showing the guy. And then when you see that he's hung himself, it was like a gut punch from where you just were. And the entire movie was like that. The other thing it embraces is that guys can have relationships with each other, and they don't have to be afraid to show that they love each other.
Yep.
And that was something that's in all these Indian movies that I really do appreciate. It's not nearly as cynical as you would have in Western movies. And the woman, Karen Kapoor, who I guess her family is a big acting family in India, is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, what a beautiful, beautiful woman. And I thought their chemistry was really good. And again, like with RRR, I love that dance number. I loved the dance number with him and her with the umbrellas, a little nod to Singing in the Rain. It was just so wonderful. In fact, when he played her father, it took me a second to realize it wasn't the father, because he had that face scrunch up just like him. This, my only criticism, and it's not a real criticism, it ended like 4 times. This movie had like 4 different endings, but it didn't bother me because I wanted to spend more time with these people. This movie I had the biggest smile on my face, and I didn't get quite as emotional as Ralph did, but with everything going on with my dad and all that, I did get a little like emotional during the scene movie, I was not expecting that when I first started to watch this thing.
The guy who runs the school was such kind of a caricature that I was like, how am I going to get emotional about this guy? And then he does a scene where he hands him the pen and explains that the reason the pencil can't work is the tip could break, and then he does that whole thing about it. And I was just like, oh my, he got me. I was like so emotional about that. And he was such a caricature that to have that happen just it was surprising for me.
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I think she's in Forrest Gump with him too. I saw the trailer for it. I think that's her in there as well. She's adorable.
Is that a new release or is that an old release?
I think 2022. So I think it's fairly new.
Oh, really?
I think it might be on Netflix. I don't know if it's ours or India. Yeah, I don't know the name of it. It's not Forrest Gump. It's translated. So
Chris, I loved it. What did you think?
Yeah.
Well, John, I had a very opposite reaction of yours. I think this is probably the least favorite of all of the Indian.
Wow,
so far.
That's a shock. I can't.
I found this one a slog, guys. At 2 hours and 45 minutes, I kept checking to see how much longer I had.
Oh, wow.
man.
And it was rough for me. I found the obviousness of it
Obvious.
obvious, and the tonal shifts. It's funny because I did watch another, and I mentioned this once before. I watched another comedy called, I think it's called Dakini Sakini, about the two female police cadets. And
Yeah, you mentioned that.
also
Yeah.
sudden tonal. It went from like this kind of happy-go-lucky police cadet, almost police academy style fun to, hey, we're stealing organs. I mean, it got really dark really quick. And while I did appreciate like a lot of the stuff that they were talking about, like the the pressure, the societal pressure, the cultural pressure, the familial pressure that these guys are under, I did really, really like the part where the dean, or I guess the director of the school, was like, hey, this is what this guy's dad makes. He's going to be fine. Take off 2 zeros or 3 zeros, and this is what your dad
Yeah,
makes.
right.
Not bad.
Mhm.
Take off another zero, and that's what your family makes.
Right.
It's nothing. Basically, he was trying to tell them. He was actually kind of trying to help them, which is why I think he
Right.
gave them so many chances.
Mean but fair.
But he was such a character with the lisp and the
Right.
Yeah.
pants pulled all the way up over his stomach that I just really had a hard time like finding him amusing or funny. And that whole thing with the pen, like that's a real story, except it was the Soviets that just used a pencil. Like
Right.
that's a real thing. Except when the Soviets shot their cosmonauts out there, they just sent them with pencils because, why have this, it basically, it's the idea of over engineering. I mean, that's the whole point of that story. But
I will tell you that the book, from what I read in research, really put a spotlight on the Indian education system, and it was much more about that, which this movie
I
obviously
think that's the
Yes.
point
touched
that
upon.
Rancho was making. The point
Right,
that he
exactly.
was, and again, hitting us over the head. And the caricature of that professor, you'd never get I mean, they try it in some of these films. I'm saying the Western films. I buy all of this in these Indian films. I'm given over to the goofiness of that guy and the over sentimentality and guys crying on each other's shoulders and a song busting out in the middle of a bathroom scene.
Mhm.
You'd never get away with that in Western films. Right. Well, if it's not a musical, this is a non-musical. It's a comedy, supposedly.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, but don't get me wrong. There were, like, for example, I mean, there was a number of jokes that I laughed at, like the scene where the guy says, "Hey, we're going to pay you back the amount of each plate in installments." Like for some reason, that was really funny. Or the scene where he's like, do you know our names? Do you know our numbers? And the guy's like, no. And then he just tosses all the paper. They run away. Like to me, that was really kind of clever and funny.
Well, that's
But-
what I mean. It's it's Animal House. It's
He's
real genius.
Well, I didn't.
Well, who was more
Animal House.
realistic, the virus or Dean Wormer?
That's what I mean. Is Dean Wormer realistic? Was
I'm
Dean
not
Wormer
saying-
realistic?
I don't know. I just felt like
He was like a caricature. I know what you're
I
saying.
mean, it just didn't hit me as like I said, it just didn't quite. I just didn't find it super funny. And at 2 hours and 45 minutes, and like you said, John, I absolutely think the sequence, the song with the umbrellas.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. The movie definitely took it went up. It made me get through it when the Pia, was that her name, or Pi, or how?
Pie. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think
And she showed up. It added an extra element that gave me a
Yeah.
little bit more interest. But all in
Tell
all,
me you weren't rooting for her when they stole her away from her terrible marriage that was going to happen.
of course,
And she's asking, is Rancho single? Is he single? And they're driving it. Come on, tell me you didn't get
We
all
don't know.
right.
Just like, wait a
And
minute.
all those inventions, by the way, that you saw when we land in that village, those are all real inventions that
Yeah.
Indian inventors, I think, made. I think
Yep.
invented.
Cool.
So
Like there was some really interesting stuff, but all in all, but like I said, I think more than anything, it just at 2 hours and 45 minutes, it just kind of.
wow,
know,
Sean,
you
I
know,
wonder if you thought that,
interesting.
that speech that kid gave, and they rewrote the words in the
Oh
speech.
yeah. They
Those
cleaned it
words were they cleaned it up on the English translation.
I
Those
was
were
wondering if they were a little more.
they were
racist.
rape. That word was
Yeah.
rape that was put
It-
in there.
up. Right.
Caused a little
Originally,
controversy back
back
when
in
it came out.
2009, it was rape and breasts or bosoms. I
Yeah.
don't know if it was bosoms. And that was a big controversy. So in this one, it was served. and Bosom.
Screwed.
I think.
Screwed
Screwed.
and-
I'm sorry, Screwed and
Yeah.
Bosom,
That is served.
which was a
Right.
funny scene. I mean, it was funny, and I'm glad they changed it because I don't think that would have been funny.
No, that is
Not
not funny.
today.
And it wasn't funny then when they.
I don't think it would
have been
I guess
funny
there was some
then.
trouble, right?
Yeah.
There was one part of the movie that I thought was this was the most familiar of the movies that we've seen in terms of, you know, the story it's telling and what it's about, the tone that we talked about, the earnest emotionality, the fact that men could be friends and express their affection, like John said. I think that's wonderful. But there's a thing that you hear a lot just in life, especially when you're young, you know, follow your passion. If you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That is such horrible advice. Horrible advice. It's horrible because if there's something that you really want to do, I absolutely think you should take a crack at it. But if it doesn't work out, that doesn't mean that you are nothing and you should throw yourself out the window. It doesn't mean that your life means nothing because your work, which is just a part of your life, doesn't turn out the way it is. And I liked that the movie ended with, you know, Rancho, or I can't remember his real name now, but Rancho basically, he did what he wanted to do, but he did it in his own way outside of the system. He didn't become a successful engineer who worked at a big firm and then eventually leave and go and take his money. But like he said, I want to teach kids and I want to, you know, build things with them. And he just vanished and went and he did that. And that was a nice way to have that end. But, you know, these people, they were on the track for this job. And, you know, how many people can say, well, I want to be a wildlife photographer, and then they really can do it for a career? It's unusual. I think it's good that he tried it. But if he had failed, that wouldn't have meant that therefore, you know, his life has no meaning. And that was, you know, you hear that a lot, especially in the university setting. Like I went to Penn and people said, oh, where are you going to law school? I didn't want to go to law school, but I would say that to people, I'm not going to law school. And they would just be, oh, what are you doing? I don't understand. What are you doing?
If you had went to law school, you could be our lawyer, all of ours. We'd all
Well, the
come.
problem is, I think if I went to law school just personally,
I don't think.
I think I would have really liked law school. I don't think I would have liked being a lawyer.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's important to look ahead and see those things. You could
Well,
decide you want to be a
get-
wildlife
you know, I hear
photographer,
what-
and
you
then
know,
you're in the jungle and
you're
you
really
don't like how sweaty you are.
You're really
Well, I did-
expanding out the meaning. I mean, there's so
I
many
love
things.
the interview scene when he had the job interview.
Yeah.
And he wouldn't change his attitude because everything he's been through, and they bring him back. I love that scene. I thought that was
It was
great.
sweet.
So
Yeah.
the sentimentality in these
Yeah.
films are just off the charts.
Well, you're
And,
rooting for them all.
of course, and
Yeah.
nothing's
Even the
realistic.
weird
That
guy,
kid,
even
if
the
he
weird
really-
guy in the Volvo.
If he really faked getting off a plane like that, he'd be arrested and thrown. I mean, come on.
Well, this is 2009. man.
Okay. Well, that's still after 9/11, right? So,
Yeah.
and the whole scene with the dumping the ashes down the toilet and some of the crazy stuff that goes on, you got to suspend disbelief all over the place.
Yeah. Well, it was
But
goofy in some spots.
I'm
but-
with you, John. I'm 100% all in on this film. I highly recommend this film. I think I just thought I was crying like a baby in scenes. I just couldn't get over how emotional I was watching this stuff. Something's wrong with me. But I got to say, I loved it. I mean, it was just great. And like
me
you,
too.
Chris, I'm going 2 hours and 40 minutes, you know, but I had the opposite. I'm like, great. I just want to stay with these guys. It ended too soon for me, especially
Yeah.
when she rolls up on that scooter when he's on the beach. I was just like, oh my God, I want to
And
stay
then
with
slaps
these
him.
guys. Right.
Everybody slaps.
So
As they should.
I loved it. And I highly recommend it. I understand everybody else.
I enjoyed it, but I liked the previous comedy we did, London, better, because that one kept me.
Well, that's a black comedy. That isn't. This
Yeah.
isn't.
No, but I just love that. It kept
100%. I
surprising.
agree with you. I agree. I love that one too. But I want to see more. I'm going to check out the Forrest Gump thing just to see.
Well, I was going
what's-
on Netflix looking up Aamir Khan to see some of his
Yeah.
other stuff.
Yeah.
Because I just think he's wonderful. And apparently he's a jack guy, and he lost all his weight for that movie. He
I
had
was
to really
wondering about
thin
that.
down.
They talked about that a little bit.
But he did a lot of now. Again, I don't know. Maybe our fans, our viewers can tell us this. Are they doing their own singing, or is it like all these other movies where someone else is doing the singing? Because they can move. I mean, they definitely did their dancing. But I'm curious to know if
It's almost always someone else.
It is, right?
Mhm.
That
And
song is very
these songs
catchy.
can
though.
become a hit single for those people.
Yeah. Well,
There's also-
they've got the soundtrack all over Netflix.
Yeah,
Right.
it's funny. There's a very famous Bollywood singer named Asha Bosley. Maybe you've heard of her. And she, I looked her up on YouTube one time because full disclosure, there was a one-hit wonder from a band called Corner Shop called Brimful of Asha, and they sing about her.
Oh, right.
And so anyway, so I looked her up on YouTube, and I'm like, oh my God, this woman's absolutely ridiculously gorgeous. And then I realized, wait a minute, that's not the same lady in those two different clips. And it was because she was not only, a pop singer in her own right, but she was an older, more mature woman, and but she had this amazing voice. And so she was like, she basically dubbed all these great songs in all these, classic Bollywood films.
I think if there's a soundtrack for this film, because I would have to get
Sure.
There is a soundtrack that plays on Netflix. I'm sure it's available.
Oh,
Because there was like 4 songs in it, wasn't
So
there?
much fun.
4 or
Yeah,
5.
just look it up on YouTube Music
Yeah.
or Amazon or Spotify.
Yeah.
You'll find it.
Yeah.
I do want to say one thing, lest our Indian audiences think that this is some kind of criticism. The fact that it's predictable in and of itself is not a problem for me. There's a reason that formulas are satisfying. There's a reason, there's a pleasure in seeing how it goes. The only true surprise was, how are they going to explain that he disappeared? And they decided to explain it by he wasn't who he said he was. But when they go to on the way to the house where he's supposed to be, when they walk in the room and you see somebody, you don't see his face.
Right.
It's not shocking that it's not him, that kind of thing. But that's okay. I mean, I didn't watch Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and think there's a really good chance he's just going to stay in that cult and, live in that temple under the palace for he's never, of course he's going to get out. Of course he's going to win. There's nothing wrong with that.
But it was shocking when they showed the class picture.
Right.
The
Yeah.
other
Well,
guy was in
there
it.
were
That
there
was
were a
shocking.
few
Yeah, I don't
surprises
know.
around
That's
that
the
storyline,
one
which was nice.
piece that was confusing.
Well,
Like,
they photoshopped it to put him in it because he was just.
the other thing
That's
that
all.
you just reminded me
Exactly.
too, Drew. Of
He was the groundskeeper the whole time.
The scene where I lost it too is when the little guy, they met
Millimeter.
the little guy,
Millimeter.
Millimeter was the kid.
Yeah.
Oh my God! I was like,
Oh, at
oh,
the
it's
school?
him. That's the guy.
Yeah, it
Well,
was sweet. It was sweet.
very
Rancho
sweet.
gave it away. He said, just wear the uniform and blend in,
Yeah.
which
Right.
is exactly what he did.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great film. I thoroughly enjoyed the
loved it.
film. I look
I
forward
loved
to.
it.
I think
Yeah.
they made a sequel or attempted a sequel. I'm not sure.
Yeah, they were
really?
talking about it. They were supposed to,
Yeah.
in 2020, they were supposed to be, but I don't know if it happened.
I think these 3 have done movies together before. I think this was one of 3 that they had done together. And that kid at the end looked like Horshack from Welcome Back, Kotter. Anybody else feel that way? With the
Mr.
perm.
Cutter.
With the perm. All right, so I loved it. For our first foray into this Indian, once a week thing, I think it was a great.
Wait,
good
what's
start.
going to be it's not going to be Yippee-Ki-Yay. It's got to be something different
Yeah,
for this
I don't
show,
know how
right?
to review. We'll have to
Wow.
just. Should we do stars? How do you guys want to do this?
Zooby Dooby or Zooby Don't?
Zooby Dooby. All is well. All is well.
All is
hey,
well.
that's a good one. All is well.
So,
All is well.
all right. So what we're gonna do now is we'll spin for the next one we're gonna do. You guys
We got
see
4. We got 4 on there.
that? Can you see those?
Ratasan.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Ratatouille.
What? Ratuli?
No, do some.
Ratsan,
Pixar joke.
Pavmat,
Oh,
Drishyam 1, and
the
This
one
is
we can never pronounce.
Sapada Parabarabai. Okay. We'll just spin it now.
SP.
Here we go.
SP. Spin the wheel.
We'll spin the wheel.
Also, we can't pronounce it.
Padmavat. That's
Oh,
another one that
that's
everybody has been recommending. So
Padmavat will be the next film.
That's going to be a little different.
I think it will.
Gangs of Washoe. Everyone keeps recommending.
So what's the thrust of that movie? Does anyone know?
It's set in the, I believe, in the 14th century, and it's about the options that women find themselves having in the male-dominated society of the time. So, like, super fun, epic.
Sounds very light.
Wow. So it's going to be goofy.
Yeah, it's gonna be really silly.
I bet it'll
And
have a
Chris
guy
is gonna
with
love it.
hair.
Chris is going to be like,
There'll be a lot of
that
hair. in this
4-hour
one.
and 30-minute movie, I wish it was 5.
Yeah, I mean, it's no like let's say, as vibrant as John le Carré or something, but it's definitely
Oh,
definitely
what
its
it
own
is.
thing.
Oh, I want to say one more thing about 3 Idiots that fascinated me. The cinematography, obviously they must have used drones or something, and the color palette of
That
that
is
movie
beautiful.
was just vibrant.
Well, and then they do that whole thing where they go, it looked like he lived in a black and white movie, and they're doing the
Yeah.
whole thing in black
I
and
know
white.
that.
Like an old
They're
movie.
so playful.
Yeah.
And
Well,
like
that is- That is clearly a callback to movies of that era in India that we are just not familiar with.
Right.
I mean, it looks like those movies. There's probably scenes in Three Idiots that are direct callbacks to, hit movies from 1954 or something. And I liked knowing that was happening, even though I didn't know what the reference was.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I say, every time they put all the money on the screen. It is stunning.
But I just wanted to call that out because I remember, every time they'd switch to a scene, it was just these colors just popped out at you. It was really great.
And the costuming. I mean, the dresses they wore at the wedding and even when they put the yellow things on their head to go into the wedding,
gorgeous.
But she is gorgeous. Piles of food. Anyway, great film. All right, so next week we're doing Padmavat.
Even in that helmet she was wearing, she was gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a cute helmet.
So next week, Padmavat. Okay, everybody.
So let us know what you think about our first all Indian episode. This is it going forward for you guys because of your support you've given us. So remember what we said. If you like this, subscribe to it. And if you know other Indian film fans out there, please share it with them. Get them subscribed. We're going to have polls and all kinds of stuff. So we really appreciate your support, you guys. So thanks. And thanks for picking this movie. I loved it.
Yeah. All is well. All right, everybody. Have a good week.